The lighthouse stood like a sentinel against the bruised sky, its white tower stark against the gathering storm clouds. Evan Mitchell climbed the spiral stairs with practiced ease, his boots echoing in the hollow space. He'd climbed these same 163 steps every day for 2 years. And still, the rhythm brought him something close to peace. At the top, he surveyed the churning Atlantic. The weather report had warned of the season's worst storm. And the ocean was already responding, waves building, wind picking up, the salt air thick with electricity. Most people would find this frightening. Evan found it honest. The ocean didn't pretend. It didn't smile at you while breaking your heart. It just was powerful, indifferent, and somehow more comforting than any human interaction he'd had in years. He adjusted the lighthouse lens, checking the rotation mechanism one more time. The automated system had backups upon backups. But Evan believed in the old ways. His grandfather had kept this lighthouse for 40 years before automation, and Evan honored that legacy with his diligence. "Still talking to ghosts, old man?" he muttered to himself, a wry smile tugging at his lips. At 34, Evan knew he wasn't old, but he felt ancient. Grief had a way of adding decades to your bones, making every movement heavy with the weight of what you'd lost. 2 years since Marcus died. 2 years since the car accident that took his partner of 8 years and shattered Evan's world into pieces too small to ever reassemble. The mainland offered sympathy. Friends brought casseroles and platitudes. His sister called weekly, worry threading through her voice like a constant hum. But Evan needed silence. He needed the island this tiny, windswept rock 3 miles off the main coast, where the only neighbors were seabirds and seals. He descended the stairs and turned to the keeper's cottage, a small but sturdy structure built into the cliff face. The radio crackled with weather updates. The storm would hit by evening. Ferry service had already suspended. Evan checked his supplies. He had enough food and water for 2 weeks if necessary. Plenty of firewood, batteries, books. Everything he needed to be alone. He was preparing dinner, something simple. Pasta with the vegetables from his small greenhouse. When he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. An engine struggling against the rising wind. Evan stepped onto the porch, squinting against the spray. A small boat was limping toward the island's single dock, its motor coughing, a figure hunched at the helm. "Damn fool," Evan breathed. "No one should be out in this." He grabbed his waterproof jacket and jogged down the path to the dock, arriving just as the boat sputtered its last and drifted into the pilings. The figure stumbled out. A man, Evan registered, maybe his age or younger, soaked through and carrying an expensive-looking camera bag like it was more precious than his own life. "Are you insane?" Evan shouted over the wind. "There's a storm coming." The man looked up, and Evan's words caught in his throat. Even drenched and clearly exhausted, the stranger was striking. Dark hair plastered to his forehead, sharp cheekbones, eyes that looked gray in the strange pre-storm light. Those eyes met Evan's with a mixture of desperation and defiance. "I know," the man said, his voice rough. "I was trying to outrun it. Didn't work. Clearly." Evan grabbed the boat's line, securing it. "You can't stay on that. It'll be matchsticks by morning. Come on." The stranger hesitated, and Evan saw something flicker across his face. A calculation, maybe, or a moment of doubt. But the wind gusted hard enough to nearly knock them both over, and the decision was made. They hurried up the path, Evan leading. The stranger following with his camera bag, clutched close. By the time they reached the cottage, the first fat raindrops were falling. The sky had turned the color of slate. Inside, Evan pointed to the bathroom. "There's a shower. Get warm. I'll find you dry clothes." The stranger nodded, water dripping onto the worn wooden floor. "Thank you." Save it," Evan said, not unkindly. "Get dry first." While the shower ran, Evan pulled out spare clothes, his own things. Soft flannel and cotton worn, comfortable over years. He tried not to think about Marcus's clothes, still boxed in the closet. Waiting for a moment of strength he hadn't found yet, the stranger emerged 20 minutes later, transformed. Evan's clothes fit him reasonably well. He was slightly taller than Evan, but leaner, and the gray Henley and dark jeans suited him. his dark hair curled as it dried and without the exhaustion and rain. He was undeniably handsome in a way that made Evan's stomach tighten uncomfortably. "Don't," he told himself. "Don't even start." "I'm Adrian," the man said, extending his hand. "Adrian Cole." Evan shook it briefly. Adrian's hand was warm, the grip firm. "Evan Mitchell." "You picked a hell of a time to go sightseeing." Adrian's laugh was unexpected, genuine, and slightly self-deprecating. "That obvious I'm not local?" The boat rental tags were a hint. That, and the fact that anyone from around here would know better. Evan moved to the stove, stirring the pasta. "You're lucky you didn't capsize, I know." Adrian sat at the small kitchen table, cradling the mug of tea Evan had prepared. "I'm a photographer. I was shooting the coastline, lost track of time. When I realized the storm was coming, I headed for the nearest land, which happened to be my island. Your island. I keep the Lighthouse. Live here full-time." Evan divided the pasta between two bowls, added sauce, brought them to the table. "You'll be stuck here until the storm passes. Could be a day, could be 3. Adrian's expression shifted, something vulnerable passing through those gray eyes. "That's actually okay?" Evan studied him over his bowl. There was a story there, he could tell. People didn't end up alone on lighthouses without stories. People didn't look relieved to be stranded unless they were running from something. Takes one to know one, Evan thought. They ate in silence, the storm beginning its assault on the cottage. Wind howled around the eaves, rain battered the windows, and somewhere in the distance, the ocean roared like a living thing. But inside, the cottage was warm, the lights steady, and the silence between them was surprisingly comfortable. After dinner, Adrian insisted on helping with dishes despite Evan's protests. They moved around the small kitchen with careful politeness, avoiding too much contact, speaking only about practical things: where Adrian could sleep, the small guest room, where the extra blankets were kept, how the plumbing worked. But Evan was hyper-aware of Adrian's presence. The way he moved with unconscious grace, the slight accent in his voice that suggested he wasn't from New England, the careful way he handled Evan's things, respectful of the space. "I should check the lighthouse," Evan said when the kitchen was clean. "Make sure everything's secure. Can I come?" Evan hesitated. His instinct was to say no, to keep this stranger at arm's length. But something in Adrian's voice, a note of genuine interest, maybe even need, made him nod. They climbed the stairs together, Adrian pausing occasionally to catch his breath or admire the structure. At the top, the storm was in full fury, waves crashing against the rocks below, spray reaching halfway up the tower. "It's incredible," Adrian breathed, his face pressed close to the glass. "It's doing its job," Evan said, warning ships away from the rocks, keeping people safe. Adrian turned to look at him, and in the rotating light, his expression was unreadable. "Is that why you're here? To keep people safe?" "I'm here because I need to be." Words came out sharper than Evan intended. "I understand that," Adrian said softly. "More than you might think." They stood in the lighthouse tower as the storm raged. Two strangers seeking shelter from different tempests. And Evan felt the first crack in the walls he'd built so carefully around his heart. Back in the cottage, Evan showed Adrian to the guest room. It's small, but the bed's decent. Bathrooms down the hall. "If you need anything, Evan," Adrian's hand touched his arm just briefly. "Thank you for not turning me away." "Couldn't leave you on the dock," Evan said gruffly. "But you could have." "Some people would have." Adrian's smile was sad, knowing, "I recognize a fellow refugee when I see one." Evan wanted to deny it, to maintain his carefully constructed isolation. But something about Adrian's openness, his willingness to be vulnerable, made the denial stick in his throat. "Get some rest," he said instead. "Storm should blow through by tomorrow evening." In his own room, Evan lay awake, listening to the house creak and settle, the storm a constant percussion outside. Down the hall, he could hear Adrian moving quietly, settling in. For the first time in 2 years, Evan wasn't alone in this house. The thought should have been intrusive, unwelcome. Instead, it felt like the lighthouse beam cutting through fog, inspected. Startling, but somehow right. He touched the simple gold band he still wore on a chain around his neck. Marcus's ring. The one he'd been too broken to bury with him. I'm not betraying you, he thought. He's just a stranger. He'll leave when the storm passes. But even as he thought it, Evan knew something had shifted. The lighthouse had done its job. It had guided someone to shore. Whether that someone was Adrian or himself, Evan couldn't yet say. Outside, storm howled like all the grief Evan had been holding inside. And somewhere in the darkness, between thunder and wave crash, he thought he heard his heart whisper a word he'd forgotten how to believe. Morning came slowly. The world outside washed in gray and silver. The storm hadn't passed, had merely paused, gathering strength for another assault. Evan woke to the sound of the wind and something else. Movement in his kitchen. He pulled on a sweatshirt and padded down the hall in his bare feet, stopping in the doorway. Adrian stood at the stove, competently managing eggs and toast, humming something under his breath. He'd clearly found Evan's coffee pot was brewing, filling the cottage with rich, dark fragrance. You don't have to do that, Evan said. Adrian turned, startled, then smiled. In the morning light, wearing Evan's clothes and making breakfast in Evan's kitchen, he looked dangerously domestic. You fed me last night. Fair's fair. Evan wanted to argue that he'd only done what anyone would do, but he was too honest with himself. Not everyone would have helped. Marcus used to tease him about his gruff exterior hiding a soft heart. The memory made him ache. They ate at the small table, rain streaking the windows. Adrian was easy to be around. He didn't push conversation, but didn't hide in silence either. He asked about the lighthouse, about the island, and Evan found himself answering more thoroughly than he'd intended. So you grew up here? Adrian asked, cradling his coffee mug. Summer months? My grandfather was the keeper. I spent every June through August climbing those stairs, learning the systems, helping him maintain everything. Evan smiled at the memory. He died when I was 20. By then, the lighthouse was automated, but I never forgot it. And you came back, 2 years ago. Evan's jaw tightened. Needed somewhere quiet. Adrian nodded, recognizing the boundary. I get that. Quiet is underrated. What about you? Evan asked, surprising himself. You said you're a photographer. Something shuddered in Adrian's expression. Was it my don't know anymore? The vulnerability in those words called to something in Evan. Want to talk about it? Adrian laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you want to talk about why you're hiding on a lighthouse? Fair enough. Evan stood, gathering plates. But if we're going to be stuck together for another day or two, might as well get comfortable with uncomfortable silence. Or, Adrian said carefully, we could try uncomfortable honesty instead. Evan paused at the sink, his back to Adrian. The offer hung in the air between them, fragile, frightening, tempting. He thought about his therapist on the mainland, the one he saw once a month via video call, who kept telling him that isolation wasn't healing. Connection is scary, she'd said, but it's also necessary. I lost my partner, Evan heard himself say. 2 years ago, car accident. He died instantly. The silence that followed wasn't pitying or awkward. It was respectful, weighted with understanding. I'm sorry, Adrian said quietly. That kind of loss. There aren't words. No, Evan agreed. There really aren't. I lost someone too, Adrian offered after a moment. Not to death. To betrayal. My boyfriend of 5 years. Turns out he was using my connections in the art world to advance his own career, sleeping with gallery owners, making deals behind my back. When I found out, he didn't even deny it, just said I should have seen it coming. Evan turned to face him. Adrian's expression was raw, unguarded. How long ago? 6 months. I've been on the road since then, taking photos of empty places. Lighthouses, abandoned towns, storm-battered coasts. He gestured toward his camera bag, trying to find something that feels real. And have you? Adrian's smile was small but genuine. Maybe this place feels real. You feel real. The words settled between them like a confession. Evan should have pulled back, should have reinforced his boundaries. Instead, he heard himself say, "Want to see the island? Storm's calmer right now." They bundled into waterproof gear and ventured out. The wind was still strong, but the rain had softened to a mist. Evan led Adrian along the cliff paths, pointing out landmarks: the seal colony, the tide pools, the old shipwreck visible at low tide. Adrian photographed everything, but not frantically. He moved with deliberation, finding angles, waiting for light. Watching him work was mesmerizing. He'd crouch low to catch a wave's curl, climb onto rocks for a better vantage. His whole body attuned to the art. "You're really good at this," Evan observed. Adrian lowered his camera, looking embarrassed. "Thanks. I used to love it. Before it became about exhibitions and critics and who you knew. Before Garrett made it all political." "Garrett's your ex?" "Yeah. Garrett Chen. He's kind of a big deal now in New York gallery circles." Adrian's voice was bitter. "Using all the contacts I introduced him to. Screw him," Evan said bluntly. "His success doesn't diminish your talent." Adrian blinked, then laughed shrill laughter this time. "That's very direct. I don't have the energy for anything else." Evan grinned despite himself. "Marcus used to say I had all the tact of a brick." "Did you love him?" "Marcus." The question was gentle, curious, not invasive. Evan found he wanted to answer. "Yes. From the moment we met at a coffee shop in Portland." He spilled his latte on my laptop, was so flustered trying to apologize. He had this incredible smile. "We were together 8 years. Married for 3. That sounds beautiful." It was. Evan looked out at the ocean, and then it was gone. The grief was so big, I didn't know how to hold it. People kept saying it would get better with time, but it just got different. Quieter maybe, but always there. Adrian stepped closer, not touching, but present. "I don't think grief is something you get over. I think it's something you learn to carry differently." "When did you get so wise?" "Therapy," Adrian admitted. "Lots of therapy. After Garrett, I was a mess. Couldn't trust anyone, couldn't trust myself. My therapist suggested this trip. Go find what makes you feel something real. Is it working?" Adrian met his eyes, and Evan saw something flicker their awareness. Attraction, fear. "Yeah, I think it might be." They stood on the cliff's edge, the ocean churning below. Two broken men finding unexpected resonance in each other's damage. Evan felt his carefully maintained equilibrium tilting, like the world was shifting beneath his feet. "We should head back," he said, but he didn't move. Adrian's voice was soft. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Are you angry at me for being here?" The question surprised Evan. "No. Why would I be?" "Because I'm disrupting your isolation. Because I'm making you feel things maybe you didn't want to feel." Evan considered lying, deflecting. But Adrian had been honest with him. Vulnerable. He deserved the same. "Maybe a little," he admitted. "Not angry exactly. Scared, maybe?" "Of what?" "Of forgetting. Of moving on. Of dishonoring what Marcus and I had." The words felt like stones being pulled from his chest. "Everyone says it's okay to be happy again, but it feels like betrayal." "I don't think love works that way," Adrian said gently. "I think love expands. What you had with Marcus that doesn't disappear because you connect with someone else. It's not a zero-sum game. You sound very certain for someone who got his heart shattered 6 months ago." Adrian laughed. "Fair point. Maybe I'm just talking to convince myself. But I do believe it. We're not betraying our pasts by trying to have futures." Evan wanted to argue, to find holes in that logic. But standing there with Adrian, the mist cool on his face and the ocean loud in his ears, he felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Possibility. Back at the cottage, they shed their wet gear and fell into an easy rhythm. Adrian sorted through his photos on his laptop while Evan did maintenance work. But they stayed in the same room, the small living area. As if neither wanted to retreat to isolation anymore. As afternoon faded to evening, the storm picked up again. They made dinner together, moving around the kitchen in an improvised dance. Adrian told stories about his photography adventures, getting chased by an angry ram in Iceland, accidentally photographing a celebrity wedding in Scotland, Spending a week in a Portuguese fishing village where no one spoke English, but everyone fed him, Evan found himself laughing. Really laughing for the first time in memory. Adrian had a gift for storytelling, his hands animated, his expressions vivid. Watching him, listening to him, Evan felt the ice around his heart beginning to crack. After dinner, they sat on the couch with wine, a bottle Evan had been saving for no particular reason. The storm outside was a constant presence, but inside felt safe, warm, separate from the world. "Can I show you something?" Adrian asked, pulling out his camera. "Sure." Adrian scrolled through images, then turned the screen toward Evan. It was a photo from that morning. Evan, standing on the cliff, looking out at the ocean, his profile sharp against the gray sky. The composition was stunning, the lighting perfect. But what caught Evan's breath was the expression on his own face. He looked contemplative. Sad, yes, but also strong. Like a man who'd survived something terrible and was still standing. "You took this without me noticing?" "I'm sneaky when I need to be." Adrian's smile was soft. "You should see yourself the way I see you, Evan. You're not just surviving. You're this incredible presence, solid, real, beautiful." The last word hung between them, loaded with meaning. Evan's heart hammered in his chest. "Adrian, I know." Adrian set the camera aside. "I know this is complicated. I know we're both damaged. I know I'm leaving when the storm passes. But I need you to know that being here with you these 2 days, it's the most alive I've felt in months." Evan should have been sensible. Should have maintained distance. Instead, he reached out and took Adrian's hand. Their fingers intertwined, fitting together like they'd been made for it. "I feel it too," Evan whispered, "and it terrifies me." "Me too." Adrian squeezed his hand. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe fear means we're actually feeling something worth protecting." They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, the storm raging outside while inside, something fragile and precious began to bloom. Neither of them knew what morning would bring. But for now, in this moment, they had each other's warmth and honesty and the tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, broken things could find ways to fit together. The third morning dawned clear. Evan woke to silence, no wind, no rain, just the gentle sound of waves and gulls. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and bright, which means Adrian can leave today. The thought sent a sharp pain through Evan's chest. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince himself it was better this way. Clean break. No complications. They'd shared something meaningful but temporary, like ships passing safely in the night thanks to the lighthouse beam, except Evan didn't want Adrian to leave. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. In 3 days, this stranger had managed to reach past all of Evan's defenses. Making him feel things he'd thought were buried with Marcus, he found Adrian already awake. Standing on the cottage porch with a mug of coffee, photographing the morning light. Evan watched him through the window for a moment, the way he held the camera like an extension of himself. The slight tilt of his head as he composed shots, the peace in his expression. "Morning," Evan said. Stepping outside, Adrian turned, and his smile was like sunrise. "Morning. It's gorgeous out here. Storm's over. You'll be able to get back to the mainland today." Something flickered across Adrian's face. Disappointment, maybe? Or regret? "Yeah, I suppose I should." They stood in awkward silence, the easy connection from the night before, feeling suddenly fragile in the morning light. Evan wanted to say stay, but the word felt too big, too presumptuous. "Breakfast?" he offered instead. Over eggs and toast, they talked carefully around the elephant in the room. Adrian mentioned he needed to check on his boat, see if it survived the storm. Evan offered to help. They both avoided discussing what happened next. At the dock, the boat was miraculously intact, though battered. Evan helped Adrian bail water and check the engine. It coughed, but started. "Looks like you're good to go," Evan said, trying to sound neutral. "Looks like—" Adrian didn't move to get in the boat. "Evan, I need to tell you something." The serious tone made Evan's stomach tighten. "Okay. You know how I said I'm a photographer?" "That's true." but I wasn't entirely honest about why I'm here. Adrian took a breath. Adrian Cole isn't just some random photographer. I had a pretty big career before everything fell apart. Magazine covers, gallery shows, the whole thing. When Garrett's betrayal went public, he gave interviews, played the victim, made me look like the bad guy couldn't handle the scrutiny. So I disappeared. You're running, Evan said, understanding. I was. But these 3 days with you, they've made me realize something. I've been so focused on what I lost, the career, the relationship, the reputation, that I forgot about what I still have. My talent, my vision, my ability to connect with people. He stepped closer. The ability to connect with you. Evan's heart was racing. Adrian, what are you saying? I'm saying I don't want to leave. Not yet. I'm saying these 3 days have meant something to me, and I think they've meant something to you, too. I'm saying I know we're both scared and broken, but maybe that's exactly why we should try. Try what? This, us. Whatever this could be. Adrian's gray eyes were intense, pleading. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But when has timing ever been perfect? When has love ever been logical? Love? Evan's voice cracked on the word. Maybe, eventually. Or maybe just the beginning of something that could become love, if we're brave enough. Adrian reached for Evan's hand. I'm not asking you to marry me or make promises we can't keep. I'm just asking for time. Let me stay a while longer. Let's see where this goes. Every rational part of Evan's brain screamed that this was too fast, too risky, too much. But his heart, that battered, grieving, slowly healing heart, whispered something different. What if this is your second chance? I'm terrified, Evan admitted. Me too. Marcus would want you to be happy, Adrian said gently. I didn't know him, but anyone who loved you would want that. Evan thought about Marcus's last words to him that morning, before the accident. Love you. See you tonight. Simple, everyday, full of assumption that there would always be more time. But there hadn't been, and Evan had spent 2 years frozen in that last moment. Maybe it was time to step forward again. "'Kay," he whispered. "Okay? Stay for a while. Let's see what this is." Adrian's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. He pulled Evan into a hug, and Evan let himself lean in. Let himself feel the solid warmth of another person. Let himself hope. They spent the rest of the morning in a strange, wonderful limbo. Adrian called the boat rental company, explaining he wanted to extend his trip. Evan showed him around the lighthouse properly, explaining the mechanisms, the history, the daily rhythms of life on the island. You really love this place, Adrian observed, watching Evan adjust the lens with practiced hands. It's simple here, honest. The lighthouse has one job: keep people safe. That's all it does, but it does it well. Evan paused. I think I needed that simplicity after Marcus died. Everything on the mainland felt complicated: people's expectations, their pity, their advice. Here, I just wake up and take care of the light. But you can't hide forever, I know. Evan turned to face him. These 3 days with you have shown me that. I've been existing, not living. There's a difference. So what do we do now? Evan considered. Take it slow. Get to know each other properly. No pressure, no expectations. Just see what develops. I can do that, Adrian agreed. That afternoon, they established a routine. Evan did his lighthouse checks while Adrian explored the island with his camera. They came together for meals, trading stories: Adrian's adventures around the world, Evan's quieter tales of island life, and his memories of Marcus. Each story was a thread, weaving them closer together in the evening. They sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. Adrian's shoulder pressed against Evan's, warm and solid. Can I ask you something? Adrian said. Always. Do you feel guilty? About this. About us. Evan had been asking himself the same question. A little, he admitted. Not because I think Marcus would be angry. More because I'm learning to live in a world where he doesn't exist anymore, and that feels like accepting his absence. That's not betrayal, Evan. That's survival. That's honoring what you had by choosing to keep living. My therapist says something similar. Jan laughed. Smart woman. She is. She'd probably like you. Evan took a breath. I should tell you something, too. You're not the first person I've been attracted to since Marcus died, but you're the first one I've wanted to explore that attraction with. The first one who feels worth the risk? I'm honored, Adrian said softly, and terrified. What if I screw this up? What if I hurt you? What if you don't? What if we actually help each other heal? Evan turned to look at him. Risk goes both ways, Adrian. You're trusting me with your heart, too. Their faces were close, the sunset casting them in golden light. Evan could see the flecks of blue in Adrian's gray eyes, the slight scar above his left eyebrow, the way his lips parted as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Can I kiss you? Adrian whispered. Evan's heart stopped, then started again, faster. Yes. The kiss was gentle. Tentative lips continuberry. Brushing, testing, asking permission with every second. Evan felt tears prick his eyes at the sweetness of it, at the patience Adrian showed, at the way his own body responded with a hunger he'd thought long dead. When they pulled apart, both breathing harder, Evan pressed his forehead to Adrian's. I don't know what I'm doing. Neither do I, but I'm willing to figure it out together. They sat like that until full dark, holding each other, the lighthouse beam rotating above them in its endless vigil. Evan felt something shift inside him, not the erasure of grief, but the expansion of space for something new beside it. That night, they stayed up late talking. Adrian showed Evan his portfolio, explaining the stories behind each image. There was raw talent there, but also pain photos of empty rooms, abandoned places, lonely landscapes. The visual diary of a man searching for connection. After Garrett, I couldn't photograph people anymore, Adrian admitted. Couldn't trust myself to see them clearly. So I photographed spaces where people used to be. Echoes and absences, is that changing? Evan asked. Adrian pulled up a photo, the one he'd taken of Evan on the cliff. Yeah, I think it is. This is the first portrait I've taken in 6 months, and I want to take more. Of you, of this place of life, instead of the ghost of it. I'd like that. They fell asleep on the couch, tangled together under a blanket, the fire burning low. Evan woke once in the night, momentarily disoriented by the weight of another person against him. For a second, his heart cried out for Marcus. But then he remembered Adrian, the storm. The choice to try again did the grief didn't disappear, but it made room. In the morning, Evan woke to find Adrian sketching him, using a small notebook and pencil. You're drawing me? Just rough composition notes. For photos later, Adrian smiled. You're beautiful in morning light, all tousled and soft. Evan felt himself blush. I'm a mess, a beautiful mess. They made breakfast together, their movements synchronized now, comfortable. Evan realized they'd fallen into a rhythm without trying. Adrian intuiting what Evan needed, Evan making space for Adrian's presence. So what's the plan? Adrian asked over coffee. I can stay a week, maybe 2. But eventually I'll need to go back to the mainland, deal with my storage unit, my mail, figure out my life. I need to stay here. At least for now. Evan met his eyes. But that doesn't mean this has to end. Long distance? Adrian looked hopeful and anxious. For a while, maybe. Or... Evan hesitated, then pushed forward. Or you could come back. Between trips, make this a base. I have the guest room, or... Evan's heart raced. Or we see where things go, and maybe eventually you don't need the guest room. Adrian's smile was radiant. I'd like that. A lot. One step at a time, though, Evan cautioned. Let's not rush, agreed. Slow and steady. Adrian reached across the table, lacing his fingers through Evan's, but moving forward. Together. Outside, the ocean sparkled under morning sun, calm and endless. The lighthouse stood faithful, its beam ready for the next night, the next storm, the next soul needing guidance home and inside the keeper's cottage. 2 men who'd been lost in their separate storms began charting a course toward each other, toward healing, toward the terrifying and beautiful possibility of love found after loss. 3 months later, Evan stood at the ferry dock on the mainland, watching the boat approach. His heart hammered with anticipation and nervousness. Adrian had been gone for 2 weeks, his longest absence since that first storm. And Evan had been surprised by how much he missed him. Not just missed, ached for. The realization had been gradual, building over weeks of Adrian's visits. After that first extended week, Adrian had returned to the mainland to settle his affairs. But true to his word, he came back to the island. First for weekends, then for longer stretches. They fell into a rhythm, Adrian exploring and photographing during the day, while Evan tended the lighthouse, then coming together for meals, for conversation. For the slow building of intimacy, they'd been careful with each other, respectful of boundaries and bruises. Some nights they talked until dawn. Other nights they sat in companionable silence, Adrian editing photos while Evan read. They'd kissed more sweet, searching kisses that left them both breathless, but never pushed farther than either was ready for, and slowly, Evan felt himself coming back to life. The ferry docked, and Adrian appeared, camera bag over his shoulder, duffel in hand. When he spotted Evan, his face lit up with such joy that Evan felt his throat tighten. "Hey," Adrian said, pulling Evan into a hug. "Hey yourself." Evan breathed in the scent of him coffee and the faint chemical smell of darkroom developer. "How was New York?" "Productive. I'll tell you everything." Adrian pulled back, studying Evan's face. "You okay? You look tired. Couldn't sleep much without you here." Admission hung between them, more vulnerable than Evan had intended, but true. Adrian's expression softened. "I couldn't either." On the boat ride back to the island, Adrian told him about the trip. He'd gone to New York to meet with his former agent, to discuss the possibility of a new exhibition. I showed her the Lighthouse series. The photos of this place, of the island, he paused. "Of you." Evan's heart skipped. "What did she say?" "She wants to show them. Says they're the best work I've ever done. Raw and real and full of emotion." Adrian took Evan's hand. "I told her I'd think about it. Because those photos, they're personal. They're our story. I won't share them publicly without your permission. They're your art, Adrian. You should show them. They're us. That makes them different." Adrian squeezed his hand. "I also saw Garrett. He heard I was in town, wanted to meet. I almost didn't go, but my therapist thought it might give me closure." "How was it?" "Awkward. Weird," he apologized, which was something. Said he'd been selfish and stupid. Asked if we could be friends. Adrian laughed without humor. I told him no, that what he did broke something that can't be fixed. But I also told him I forgave him. Not for him, for me. How did that feel? Liberating. Like I finally put down something heavy I'd been carrying. Adrian looked at Evan. "Being with you, it's shown me what real partnership looks like. What it means to be with someone who sees you and still chooses you every day." Evan's eyes stung. "You've done the same for me." Back at the cottage, they settled into their rhythm. Adrian unpacked while Evan made lunch. Later, they walked the island trails, Adrian photographing the early autumn light while Evan collected firewood. They moved together like they'd been doing this for years instead of months. That evening, as they cooked dinner together, Adrian grew quiet. "What's on your mind?" Evan asked. "I need to tell you something." Adrian set down the knife he'd been using to chop vegetables. "The exhibition, if I do it, the opening would be in December. 3 months from now? And I've been offered a teaching position at a photography school in Portland. It would be part-time, just a few classes a week." Evan's stomach clenched. That's great, Adrian, really. Thing is, Portland is 3 hours from here. I could commute, but it would mean less time on the island. Less time with you. I don't want to hold you back from your career. You're not." Adrian moved closer. "But I also don't want to lose us. So I've been thinking about compromise. What if I took the Portland job, but we made this more permanent? What if I officially moved in here and we figured out a schedule? I teach 2 days a week, spend the rest here." Evan's heart raced. "Move in? As in sharing a bedroom, sharing a life, really committing to this?" Adrian's eyes were earnest, vulnerable. I know it's fast by some standards, but we've also spent nearly every day together for 3 months. I know how you take your coffee, that you talk to the lighthouse when you think no one's listening, that you still wear Marcus's ring on a chain and sometimes touch it when you're anxious. I know you, Evan, and I love what I know. The words hung in the air, shimmering with possibility and terror. Evan opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. You love me? Yes. Adrian didn't hesitate. I love you. I love your grumpiness in the morning, your dedication to this lighthouse, the way you've let me see your grief without trying to hide it. I love that you're brave enough to try again, even though you're scared. I love you, Evan Mitchell. Tears spilled down Evan's cheeks. I love you too. God, I love you too. And it terrifies me. Why? Because I lost Marcus, and it almost destroyed me. If I lose you, you won't. Adrian cupped Evan's face in his hands. I can't promise I'll never leave. No one can promise that. But I can promise I'll choose you every day I'm here. I can promise I'll be honest with you, fight with you instead of running, build a life with you instead of just passing through it. Evan closed his eyes, feeling the truth of those words settle into his bones. When he opened them, Adrian was still there, solid and real, and looking at him with such open love that Evan's defenses finally completely crumbled. Okay, he whispered. Okay? Move in. Take the job. Let's build this life together. Evan pulled Adrian close, kissing him with all the emotion he'd been holding back. I love you. I choose you. I'm terrified and hopeful and so damn grateful you crashed your boat on my island. Adrian laughed against his mouth. Best navigational error I ever made. They made love that night for the first time, tender and slow and full of whispered promises. Evan had worried he'd feel guilty, that Marcus's ghost would haunt the moment. But what he felt instead was gratitude for having loved before, for knowing what real connection felt like, for being brave enough to open his heart again. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Evan's bed, their bed now, talking quietly as the lighthouse beam rotated outside the window. I need to tell you something, Evan said, about Marcus. Okay, I'll always love him. That won't change. He'll always be part of my story, part of who I am. I know. I wouldn't want you to stop loving him. Adrian traced patterns on Evan's chest. Love doesn't evict old tenants to make room for new ones. It just expands the house. That's beautiful. I stole it from my therapist. Evan laughed, the sound easy and free. I want you to meet my sister. She's been worried about me. I think she'll like you. I'd like that. And I want you to meet my parents. They're good people, and they'll love you. We're really doing this, aren't it? Building a life. Yeah. Adrian kissed him softly. We really are. The next morning, Evan woke wrapped around Adrian, sunshine streaming through the windows. For the first time in 2 years, his first thought wasn't of loss. It was of possibility. They spent the day making plans. Adrian would keep his apartment in Portland as a base for teaching days, but most of his things would move to the island. They'd need to expand Evan's closet, maybe add some shelving for Adrian's equipment. Practical, mundane details that felt like building a foundation. That evening, Evan took Adrian to his favorite spot, hidden cove on the island's far side, where the rocks formed a natural shelter. They sat watching the sunset, the sky brilliant with orange and pink. I come here when I need to think, Evan said. I scattered some of Marcus's ashes here. It felt right. He loved the ocean. Thank you for sharing this with me. Thank you for not being afraid of his memory. Evan leaned into Adrian. I was so scared that loving again would mean forgetting him. But you've shown me it's not either war. I can honor what was while embracing what is. We're both learning, Adrian said. I spent so long after Garrett thinking I'd never trust anyone again. But you've taught me that not everyone leaves, not everyone lies. Some people stay. Some people are worth the risk. They sat until the stars emerged, the lighthouse beams sweeping over them periodically like a benediction. Evan felt Marcus's presence not as a ghost or a burden, but as a gentle memory, a foundation on which new love could build. Thank you, he thought, touching the ring on his chain. Thank you for teaching me how to love. I promise I won't waste this second chance." 3 months later, Evan stood in a New York gallery, surrounded by Adrian's photographs. The series was called Lighthouse Keeper, Images of the Island. The lighthouse, and yes, intimate portraits of Evan, but they weren't exploitative or voyeuristic. They were love letters in visual form, capturing moments of quiet joy, of healing, of two people learning to trust again. The centerpiece was a large photograph, Evan and Adrian on the lighthouse balcony, silhouetted against a storm, holding each other. Adrian had set up the shot with a timer, and it captured something raw and real, the courage it takes to choose love after loss. "It's beautiful," Evan's sister Sarah whispered beside him. "I'm so glad you found him, me too." Adrian appeared, nervous in his gallery opening clothes, and Evan pulled him close. "You did it. It's incredible." "We did it," Adrian corrected. "This is our story." Exhibition was a success. Critics praised the emotional depth, the technical skill, the narrative arc from isolation to connection. Adrian's career, which he'd thought destroyed, was reborn not as what it was, but as something truer. But the real success happened later. Back on the island, when they curled up in bed, and Adrian whispered, "Thank you for being my lighthouse. For guiding me home?" "Thank you for being brave enough to crash on my shore," Evan replied. Years later, when people asked how they met, they'd tell the story of the storm, the lighthouse, the stubborn photographer, and the grieving keeper who found each other in the tempest. But what they wouldn't say, what they'd keep private and precious, is how love had been the truest lighthouse all along. It guided them through grief and fear, through trust broken and rebuilt, through days of doubt and nights of certainty. It showed them that healing wasn't about forgetting pain, but about making room for joy. Alongside it, the lighthouse still stood, faithful and true, its beam cutting through darkness. But inside the keeper's cottage, another light burned just as steady, the light of two men who'd been lost and found each other, who chose every day to keep choosing each other, who proved that after the storm. The most beautiful dawns were possible, and every night, as the lighthouse beam rotated above them, Evan and Adrian held each other close, grateful for second chances, for storms that brought unexpected gifts, for the courage to love again. The ocean whispered its eternal song. The lighthouse kept its vigil, and two hearts, once broken, beat together as one steady, strong, and finally, truly home.